Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're taking a look at 3 different reverbs today and just the reasons why I've chosen the tracks to put these reverbs on and not just use the same one on a send track. So a lot of people say use a send track, and yeah, you can if you're trying to just use the same sort of reverb texture throughout the track, then that is perfectly fine. If you want to add a little bit of depth into the track, totally fine. But this way, I like to add things in separately and use the kind of characteristics of each synth to its potential, really. So let's just have a listen. You can hear there's an 80s style track. We're going to have a listen and then we'll see what tracks these are attached to. So I'll let you listen to this section. There's 2 drops here. This one and this one. I prefer the second one, and that's why that's highlighted. So let's have a listen and we'll come back straight after. Okay, so as you can see, we have 3 reverbs playing and we have 2 different parts of this track, both utilising the same parts. It's just the way the bass is laid out, and I prefer this kind of just nice bouncing along bass rather than this rolling bass. Just for this particular instance, it's not what I'm looking for. So let's have a look at what is happening. So you can see here I've got the Tal noisemaker playing the bass. Alright, and we've got a few things here, a saturator and a tape saturator, and then we've got Raum on there. And the reason for this is I've just loaded it up and I'd like the default sound. The only things I've changed is I've changed the density here, the size just a little bit, the mix, and the dampening and modulation there. So we've just got a little bit more modulation happening in the background. Now, if we turn this off, you'll hear kind of the depth and the feeling that it's adding. So it's adding that little bit of extra texture on there just by giving some extra, just basically it's like echoing what is actually playing. So if we just play one note, it would help if we was on the right track. So you can hear there, especially on the headphones. Let's make it more obvious. You can hear that modulation there. Turn that off. Sounds very digital. Just a bit of modulation in there. So it's just giving it a different result every time the key is pressed. So that is turned down to around 15%. Just to give it some depth. And that's just using the preset as it comes. Just tweaking a few things there to get the desired sound. Now, if I was doing a bit of sound design and I wanted a little bit of wackiness in there, I'd probably pick one of the other ones and use the feedback and pre-delay. If you haven't already seen that video, that is on screen now, where we cover Raum and its features. So that is the reason why I've used that one, just because I like the texture and the feel of Raum and the ease of use. That is probably key to why that was chosen for the bass. Straight away on the top of my head. Reverb, Tal Reverb 2 does come into mind with that, and you can do a bit of control, but it's still sounds very digital compared to how Raum can deal with it after in terms of modulation and things. So that is that one. And then on this track here, not this one, this one. This is the reason why you should label your tracks. Okay, you can see that I opted for Tal Reverb 2 first, just to see what it sounded like, and then Plate Reverb here from Arturia. And this is again just the default as it loaded. Oops, we've just moved something there. And what we have here is Model 3. So if you haven't seen the video for that as well, that is on screen as well. But this is like the more wonderful sound, as you can see it written there. It's the the longer, smoother tailed reverb preset out of the 3 models, and is more suited towards, I'd say, pads and slower moving things. So I've put the decay up to max, and I have included nearly 100% width there. Blend stays at dry wet, and that's it. That's all that's happened. Just a tad of high pass filter there just to get rid of some of that lower end, and I've just switched the modulation on, and that's it. That's all that happened with that reverb unit. So this is what it sounds like. And that's before it goes through it. So you can hear how the coloration of the reverb really affects and just gives you that feeling of the 80s straight away. It gives you that space in which to listen to the track in. At the moment, this is just boring. It's a preset. You go, yeah, that sounds nice. Think about how you want to put it in its space. So let's compare that to Tal Reverb 2. So we will bypass this one and put this one on. Okay, so this is the preset that I worked with before I put the Plate Reverb on to see what that sounded like. So it sounds quite dreamy, quite smooth. I do like the sound of it. However, I think it all gets a little bit too much, and then when you do drop the wet signal or increase the dry signal, it seems to just, it doesn't balance it in the way that I want to in my mind. So the Rev Plate came along, and you can hear little bits of modulation in there. It's still smooth, but it's just modulated that little bit, and we've got a bit of a control on the high pass filter there as well. And we can introduce some drive if we wanted to. So we could introduce some drive there just to shape and model the sound a little bit more. But the reason for choosing this is purely because of the sound. It's a vintage reverb emulation, and that is the reason why I wanted to use that there, because that's closer to the era that I am recreating, and it just makes sense. And finally, we do have Tal Reverb, and it is operating on this sound, I think. Okay, so you can see standard settings, removed a lot of the bass at 821 Hertz below, so there's no low in there, well, a sneaky little bit. And yeah, full reverb, room size, no pre-delay, stereo width, stereo input. That gives that sound. And before. So I'm just liking the tail, that's just that little bit too long, so the harmonics are overlapping. And you just get that nice, smooth, ambient feel to it. And that's the same for pretty much the other tracks as well. Tal Reverb is on there. Let's have a look. That's not playing. Let's pick a sound. There we are. So I'm using the 80s plate preset here and then just tweaked it to taste of the track. So you can see Tal Reverb does have its use. It still has its place in all of this sort of 80s sound design that I'm currently exploring. But I'd just like to show you why Rev Plate was added there for the character, and the sound of Rev Plate worked with the kind of modulating strings and leads, where Raum adds a nice warm texture to the bass and just gives it that little bit more space and feeling in the mix. And it's all about the feel. You've got to feel the music. We spend too much time looking at settings and how EQ should be done, and people are wanting perfect settings for compression and stuff like that. It's all about the sound. Use the ears, headphones on, speakers on, car speakers on, tiny little stereo in the kitchen on, whatever it might be. Test it, see what it feels like, see what it sounds like. If things aren't coming through, change your approach. And it's just trial and error, and once you've got that sound, those settings stay in your head forever then, and you have a go-to point, and then you can start mixing your track to the style that it is obviously operating in. So this is more 80s, so I'm going to use things all a little bit more lapsy-daisy and just relaxed in there. So there's the Reverbs are just going to tail for a while. There's probably going to be some sounds in there that are going to have tons of delay on it, just echoing for ages and ages and ages. And yeah, even the drums have got some space, and people say, do not put reverb on drums. Why not? Is the question. Now, technically, there is no reverb on the kick, as you've noticed here. There's just Axis multiband. But on the snare and everything else that's operating, there is some reverb. So the kick on its own, but it does sound like it's already got some room reverb on it from the preset. Now, there is nothing stopping you putting some reverb on there, so we can. Let's just go to the Arturia Rev Plate 140 again, and we'll use Model 1, which is more for drums, which we explained in the tutorial. So let's just have a listen. Listen to how the kick sounds so much different now. Let's just listen to how that sounds in the track. Probably a little bit too MIDI in there, but that's what your post equalizer's for. So you can see here, I've got no direction. I'm just messing around, seeing what these sound like. Adding a bit more brightness to it. And then we can just remove, say, from 30-ish hertz. There we are. Let's just experiment with the release time. Too long. So I'd say about there. So there you go, that is the kick before and after. So straight away, just messing around with some of the settings, picking the first model, knowing that it's better for percussion just because of the manual, and that's what it says, and just experimenting with some EQ. We could put some modulation on there if you wanted to, experiment with the pre-delay. There's nothing to say that you can't do something, and that is where I think if you are thinking of being involved in a new sound movement or a new kind of genre twist, things like this is where sound designs the new style of music. So if you're following someone else and trying to recreate exactly how they do it, you become part of the same model and you don't develop your own sound. Yeah, it might be good to, I don't know, break your way into the scene or something like that, but then you still don't have your own sound and you've still got to build it and you've still got to understand how everything's working together. So experiment. It doesn't matter if your track's going to sound rubbish. It doesn't matter if your track is never going to be finished. It's about the experimentation and things that you learn along the way. Once you've got to that point, then you can start comfortably creating a track and you don't have to think too hard about it and get stuck on a particular point, have to come to the Demis Hellen channel to look at a tutorial and work something out, and then realise all the rest of your mix is not going to allow that to fit in properly, and then you give up. That's just speaking from experience, you do give up. So just experiment, find the things that work. If you want, save these as presets, save that as 80s kick. Sorted. So I hope you found this useful in terms of looking into reverb a little bit more and how it's used to shape the sound of your track. Don't just use one reverb all the time on a send. It does save CPU power, so if CPU power is your issue, then sends are the way to go because you just got one reverb unit and it's affecting multiple channels. Great thing if you want to just colour the sound of the entire track using some sends by picking a few instruments to apply certain amounts of reverb to. Great. But if you wanted to do a little bit more and go a little bit further, try putting different reverbs and work with different saturations and modulation types that these reverbs offer. So thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, drop me a comment and leave a like. Let me know what is happening in your music's area and just what you're working on. And finally, hit that subscribe button. 3 videos per week on all different music topics. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.